Okay, here was the headline in Politico over the weekend. Ken Martin emerges as early frontrunner in race to lead Democrats as DNC chair. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with Ken Martin yet, he's the head of Minnesota's Democratic Farmer Labor Party, and he says he has already secured nearly half of the endorsements he needs to win the race for DNC chair. But we have a long way to go, and then he does have plenty of competition. Former Maryland Governor Martin O'Malley was the first to throw his hat into the ring, and Wisconsin Democratic Party Chair Ben Wickler announced his run this weekend before joining us on the show yesterday. And the field could definitely expand. But Ken Martin seems to think that there's some secret sauce in Minnesota that Democrats could use a little of on a national level.
You see, when I took over Minnesota's Democratic Party, we were deep in debts and disarray, reeling from major losses. But we brought people together. We built a winning coalition and we delivered results. Since then, we've won every single statewide election, 22 in a row. And we are the last of the blue wall states still standing. If you're looking for a creature of DC, that's not me. But I do know how the DNC works and how it isn't working. I know how to listen to the voters, to those who feel cast aside by Democrats, and to the people working hard within our party who have great ideas.
And joining me now is the chair of the Minnesota Democratic Farmer Labor Party, Ken Martin. Ken, it's great to see you. Let me just ask, because you mentioned this in your video announcing the Minnesota's DFL party did have 22 straight statewide wins against Republicans. That's a lot of statewide wins. What do you think's been working in Minnesota that you think you could take to the national party if you were to be elected DNC chair?
Well, look, I mean, the infrastructure that we've built here in Minnesota is second to none. We invest in year-round organizing. We bring all of our partners to our coordinated table and really focus on, a second to none a direct voter contact program that really invests in building relationships with the voters and turning them out. We have the highest voter turnout year in, year out. And as you mentioned, we haven't lost a statewide election here in a state that was for so long purple. It's gotten a lot bluer under my time for sure. And I think there is something we can take to D.C. here and help the folks in the DNC and folks in Washington actually win elections again. You know, look, I'm running for the DNC chair because there's too many in Washington who want to win the argument. I actually want to win elections again because that's the number one role of political parties is actually to win elections so we can pass public policy to improve people's lives and strengthen communities throughout this nation. And, you know, Jen, I worked for Paul Wellstone, who, reminded all of us that we all do better when we all do better, and really invested in what we call the Wellstone way of winning, building trust with voters, door to door, neighbor to neighbor, person to person, around shared values, around hopes and dreams. That's how we win in Minnesota, and I think we can win again around the nation with that same model.
I think a lot of Democrats watching would love to win some things coming up soon. Let me ask you, you also said in your launch announcement that you, quote, know how the DNC works and how it isn't working. I think a lot of people out there would love to know, how would you shake things up?
Well, look, I mean, there's a couple of things. And, I think the infrastructure is a lot stronger than it had been. After the 2016 election, there was a lot of good work done under Chairman Perez and Chairman Harrison to build this infrastructure. But a couple of things that I think we need to focus on now as we move forward. One is we need to make sure that the DNC isn't just focused on federal races, but that we're actually contesting races up and down the ballot, from school boards to city councils to mayoralships and county boards. It's really critical that we're truly a national party, that we're actually competing in every public policy arena around this country. We see the disastrous results of years of indifference and ignoring school board races, as an example, Jen. And we've seen the public policy that's been passed around the country that's doing such a disastrous service to the school children and to schools throughout this nation. So we've got to make sure that our party is focused up and down the ballot and that we're focused in all 57 states and every zip code in this nation. We have to get out of D.C. We have to get the DNC focused up and down the ballot and winning again.
Let me ask you about Gen Z voters. It's kind of the next generation of voters. There's always an effort to turn them out more. You've talked about the need to improve how Democrats communicate on non-traditional platforms. So give me some specific examples. What would you do as DNC chair to better communicate with this generation?
Well, first off, I have two Gen Zers, a 22-year-old boy and a 20-year-old boy, and both of them get their information, surprisingly, from TikTok. You know, I'm sort of old-fashioned. I still read a hard copy of a newspaper every morning from front cover to back. That makes me maybe a dinosaur here. But the reality is, as we know, that we have to compete in this 24/7, 365-day information environment in a more sophisticated way. We know the Republicans have beaten us to the punch here, right? For the last 4 years, they spread misinformation and lies on platforms from gaming services to podcasts to non-traditional information sites where they're using trusted messengers and validators already on those platforms to actually spread their message. We have to actually be where the voters are. You know, when people ask me, where do you go to hunt, Ken? They think I'm going to say, well, I'm going to go to the woods or to my favorite hunting spot. No, you go where the deer are. And the reality is we need to go to where the voters are. We need to go where people are at and where they're getting their information. And we have to be much more sophisticated in how we do that. And we can't just send political folks or talking heads. We've got to actually use trusted messengers, micro-influencers, and validators on these platforms to get our message across.
Ken Martin, I'll have to say, when people feel very tired and beaten down, it's always good to talk to somebody like you who has so much energy and is bringing ideas to the future. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know it's going to be a race to watch. We'll be watching it closely. We'll be right back.